What about this am I contributing to? I keep talking about community like this very nebulous thing. Like that's really problematic. It's not gonna move you forward. You've been doing that. You know what that gets you. Again, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here. I appreciate all the new subscribers that I've gotten and the amazing comments that you guys have left on my first video. I just wanted to walk you guys through like what I'm thinking as far as like the scheduling for this channel. So I'll be doing more lifestyle content and alternating that with like more sit down talking videos, either, you know, giving more social commentary, sharing some of my thoughts on like current events and topics, and then also here and there special interests, so like music, books I'm reading, things of that nature, TV shows. Thank you again for tuning in, and this will be the first of those sit down talking videos. For this week, I was having a little bit of trouble just deciding like what would be appropriate, like what would be the best things to talk about in the wake of Donald Trump winning this election. I didn't want to be insensitive when deciding like what type of content I would put out for this week. And as I like thought about it more, I decided, you know what, like there's a lot to be learned from this moment that I think that we can use to empower us instead of just feeling like victims of the system and like all bets are off and, you know, everything sucks now. My biggest takeaway from all of this is like, no one's gonna come and save you. Like, you are the person that you've been waiting for. And I feel like something that has really stuck out to me about this particular election cycle and just all of the discussions and arguments and disputes around it is like, I do think in many ways a lot of us, we relegate ourselves politically to just kind of voting every 2, maybe 4 years, largely 4 for most of us, and kind of just put our hands up and let the politicians make all the decisions for us and do all the hard things for us. Before all of this happened, I already in my own life had been doing some reflecting on just some of the circumstances that I find myself in, like being unemployed, being in like a bunch of debt, you know, having to leave my current apartment and figure out like a new place to like put roots down and try to start over, and, you know, while I look for a new job, etc. I think something that we have a tendency to do as humans is like when our circumstances do not match the idealized reality that we would like to see made manifest in our world, we kind of throw our hands up and are like, you know, life is just unfair for me. Like there's nothing I can do. The circumstances are impossible to overcome. Like this is just what it is and what it's gonna be. There have been like multiple reasons for me to feel that way. They're definitely like valid, you know, circumstances that have put me in that position where I feel like that's the way that I need to feel based on what's going on around me. And I'm not gonna get into detail into what those things are, but I had just gotten to a point where I was like, am I just gonna be bitter forever? Like I feel like at this point I've been unemployed for 6 months and I've been doing the best that I can do as far as like applying to stuff, trying to keep up still good habits, keeping up with my social life, all the things that you can really think of to like do the best that you can to still live like a decent existence on this planet. I wasn't feeling any better, you know, and I think that's when I started to turn inward and just decide like, okay, what about my internal world is keeping me from being happy with my circumstance, in the sense of maybe not necessarily, oh, I'm happy that I'm unemployed or I'm happy that I'm in debt or whatever, but what can I do to be happy no matter the circumstance? How do I find a sense of stability inwardly that isn't disrupted by the like highs and lows of life? Because that will always be there. Like there's never gonna be a point in your life where everything is always good or everything is always bad forever. That's just not how life works. So what can I do to cultivate an inner stability that isn't so easily disrupted by the goings on of life? And when I think about the election and some of the things have come as a result of these results, you know, and Trump like winning the presidency, like I'm almost even nervous to say this. Like I wasn't panicked going into the election cycle. I wasn't like bracing for impact or like worried about what the aftermath of this election was gonna be, because I had already like mentally prepared myself for what that would look like. To me, like either outcome was gonna come with really terrible really terrible just like circumstances and like consequences. In my opinion, the people who are most panicked about the election are the least like engaged politically or radical in their politics. Have we not all been watching the same news, reading the same articles, like reading the same books, like asking the same questions? Like, I just don't see how you look at the last like 6 months to a year, even 2 years, 4 years, and not see how we got to this point. You know, maybe that's just like the world that I live in and the particular ways in which I choose to show up and be engaged, to have that kind of disposition, but like that's the place that I had come from. And it made me realize that a lot of the people who I was hearing on the internet and like listening to talk about like how this was affecting them and like what they think it means for the future of our country, you really haven't been engaged politically beyond these elections. And that's why this is so shocking to you. And it brings me back to my original point of like, you are the one that you've been waiting for. Like this whole idea that we could just like cast our problems on the politicians and they're just gonna think of our best interests all the time and do the things that they're supposed to do and take care of us, like that time is over with. I don't know that it's ever been here in my lifetime, frankly. Even Obama, let me not get too political, but like that has just never been a thing. At the end of the day, you still have to be responsible for you. You still have to be accountable for you. And I think we've gotten very pacified in the ways in which we like navigate our lives because we offload so much of our responsibility onto other people. We have an awkward situation go down with a friend and we're too scared to talk to that friend about it and just be honest about the fact that it didn't feel good. So instead, like we'll, you know, offload that to another friend and just like dump on them. You never go back to that friend and actually do anything to resolve the issue and get to a place of resolution that makes it easier for both of y'all to continue forward in like a healthy dynamic. As I am now someone who has like the least amount of leverage as I've ever had. Like I'm not currently like working, I don't have a bunch of money, I don't have like a partner, I don't have like a family, you know, like I don't have all the things that I think a lot of people are usually able to like rest on to like feel better about their situation. It was almost like a trial by fire. And I think for me, it's like I've already been confronted so many times with the knowledge that I am alone that I have had to be so like self-subservient or self-serving and like sufficient for a really long time. And I think for a really long period of that, I was spending a lot of that time being resentful for the fact that I had to be independent, do everything myself, like kind of looking around to my left and right, like trying to get friends or peers or partners or whoever to like take things off my plate and do things for me so I could feel less bad about the fact that like I didn't get the care that I needed to get as a child, which is like no one else's fault but those people. And those people aren't in my life. Regardless of the situations that you find yourself in, regardless of the situation that this country is in, we are all we have. You know what I mean? And I think this kind of hands-off attitude that we've all had with our own lives, with our own futures, with our own power, with our own autonomy, like we really do, a lot of us show up just thinking like one day there's gonna be like a miracle moment and everything's gonna kind of click and make sense, and we're not really doing anything to like prepare ourselves to even be ready for that moment, even if that was going to happen, or making any material change in our own lives to like set ourselves up where we could be in a better situation than the one that we're in right now. For me, I had just gotten to a point where I was tired of feeling like there was nothing I could do, you know, and a big part of why I even started this channel was just to document like, look, I know at this point I need to be more of an active participant in my life and not just like, oh, well, nobody's giving me a job, like I guess everything sucks. Like at the end of the day, like these bills gotta get paid. So like when I do eventually move, I'm gonna go the non-traditional route. Like maybe I need to, you know, get creative about the ways in which I try to make money and try to make a living. Like I can't just rest on my laurels and be like, well, life has dealt me an unfair hand, so I'm just giving up. And I think a lot of people in the wake of this election are feeling like that same sense of despair where it's like, well, the worst thing that could possibly happen has happened, so I guess I'm just gonna like be here. I think for a lot of people, this might be the worst thing that's ever happened to them, and like I can empathize with that and be mindful that people are going to need their own time to like grieve and get to that place where they can feel like, all right, like it is what it is. I just gotta do what I gotta do to get through it. But I think, you know, as we start to get into a period where more and more of our power is going to come from our ability to like take accountability and ownership for our own actions, our own lives, and therefore create more accountability as a collective. So whatever we need to do to like get ourselves where the collective itself is taken care of and we're in a good position, like we have to learn how to do that within our own selves and within our own lives before we can actually create and cultivate a collective that is able to do that as a community. We keep talking about community like this very nebulous thing where it's like, oh, I have like a bunch of friends and we go and do this like one activity, and that's like not what it is. Like, I'm getting distracted by my hair. That's like not what it is. Like when we look back at our ancestors, regardless of where you're from, because in Ireland it was like this, in Scotland it was like this, in the African continent it was like this, the Native Americans as well. Like the collectivist ideology was not about just coming together for like a random shared interest that we had that was separate from the rest of our lives. It was a lifestyle. You did everything together. There were some people that like you would go off and hunt and then you would come back, and then other people were responsible for like cleaning the meat, getting it ready. People would cook, other people would handle like the washing, the dyeing of clothing. Some people would do the harvesting. Like all of these things were seen as critical services and like pieces of what it meant to survive and thrive in the current economy, the current culture, the current lands. It was all considered vital tools and responsibilities that kept the collective going and thriving. It wasn't like, oh, I just happen to like doing this thing, so I'm gonna go and do that. That's not to say that there weren't musicians and artists and things of that nature, but everybody had a role, everybody had a job, everybody had a thing to do. There was no kind of just like throwing your hands up and being like, well, I don't like the jobs I'm being offered, so this is the end of it. And I think because we've gotten to this place where we're also individualistic as a society, it's very difficult for us to think about living in that type of scenario, because we've all been because we're so individualistic and only thinking about ourselves, and because we're not taking responsibility or accountability for that individualistic life that we've been told that we should live, it seems so far-fetched to even consider living in a community like that where you would be altruistic and actually care about your neighbor, actually care about the people who are in your community, whether or not you agree with them. I think that people think that community is like, oh, you just get together with your girls and you go to brunch, you do this and that. Like, that's not what community is about. Community, it's about loving your neighbor, even if they're racist. It's about loving your neighbor even if they're classist. It's about loving your neighbor even if they're homophobic. And I don't mean like actually loving them, like whatever, like fuck those people. At the end of the day, what we're doing here is fighting for their right to survive, their right to live. I hear a lot of people on the internet right now talking about, oh, Florida voted, you know, pro-Trump, and the Latino vote was like pro-Trump, like they should all get deported, they should let those natural disasters take them. Like that's really problematic. I would hate for us to be so individualistic in the way that we think, that we're like, oh, well, this is the way that I see the world and this is the thing that I know was like the right thing to do. So like everybody else who like disagrees with me and doesn't think that that's the right thing to do deserves to die. Y'all sound like the oppressor. Like, again, I'm really not trying to get that political with this, but like, I really want us to be mindful of what's at the heart of what's driving these types of ideologies. You do not think that way about those people who voted that way because it benefits you. It doesn't. If we all started to think like that, there's no reason why people couldn't find a reason why you shouldn't exist either. And that's why I say, like, when we get in the habit of actually taking accountability, being like, all right, let me look around in my life. What are the things that I'm really upset about? What are the things that are disappointing and discouraging to me? What are the things that are putting me in despair and making me feel like, damn, this is like not the life that I wanted to live, not the way that I saw things going. And what about that can I take responsibility for so that I can actually do something about it? When we feel like we have to take accountability, it feels like we're blaming ourselves, and that's not the same thing. It's not my fault that my parents were problematic and toxic, but it is my responsibility to take accountability and handle whatever traumas and triggers and unhealed toxic behaviors that I'm still exhibiting and inflicting on other people and projecting on other people that are still affecting me to this day. That is my responsibility. I'm only at fault for what I'm choosing to ignore. I'm only at fault for what I'm choosing not to be responsible for that is currently affecting my reality. My parents are not here. They're not the ones creating the circumstances that I find myself in. Same thing with you. If you find yourself in situations where you're constantly dating a certain kind of person, you know, you're constantly getting fired from jobs, or like whatever the scenario might be, at some point you are going to have to give yourself the opportunity to reflect, what about this am I contributing to? Our reality is what we believe. We decide. If I'm looking at my reality right now and I'm like, oh, I'm unemployed, I'm, you know, having to leave New York, this, that, and the third, I could decide and to believe that, oh, the universe is against me and wants me to fail. Or the universe saw that the way that I was living was not in alignment with who I really am. Because I'm stubborn, it needed to force me out of that scenario so that I could go back and find myself and figure out what was truly authentic to me and build a life from that foundation. One that is in alignment with who I am, so I don't constantly get lost in the sauce trying to make shit work for me that was never meant to, just because that's what everybody on my left and right is doing. What you need to do is look at yourself, is to reflect and be like, what can I do about my circumstances that I'm not happy with? What is within my control to actually move and change and modify and grow from, so that I can create a reality that is more in line with what would make me happy, more in line with what I know deep down in my heart I deserve. I think sometimes we're afraid that we don't deserve that, so we don't take accountability for it, because we're afraid that if we go and pursue that and it doesn't work out, or it doesn't show up the way that we exactly wanted it to, then that's proof that we never deserved it in the first place. But you deserve everything that you want. We all do. Intrinsically. We are worthy intrinsically. And I think that sometimes we fall into the trap of seeing accountability and responsibility as the blame game, and when we're so used to playing the blame game with other people, we fail to recognize that by taking accountability, we actually put ourselves in the driver's seat and empower ourselves to be creators, empower ourselves to actually be able to do something, to have autonomy, to have agency. Like, wow, I have so much more power in my situation than I actually thought I did. And it's not until you can actually see the ways in which you can make moves and make changes in your specific situation, regardless of what the circumstances might be, that you'll be able to actually take steps to meaningfully change it. Continuing to be upset about it, continuing to be resentful and bitter, is not gonna move you forward. You've been doing that. You know what that gets you. Anything in motion is gonna stay in motion. That is one of Newton's laws of physics. If you want something to stop, if you want something to change, you need to push in the opposite direction. You need an equal and opposite force. And you continuing to put in the same type of negative energy into your situation is not gonna suddenly create a positive result. And some of us get really comfortable with that, because if we keep validating that negative energy and validating those negative circumstances through reinforcing them with these thoughts, then we get to feel okay about the fact that we feel shitty. We get to feel almost satisfied in our self-pity. Like, yeah, I get to feel bad for myself. Like, that's comfortable. And that's why it's so hard for some of us to give ourselves grace, because it feels like that. It feels too much like that self-pity. And I think if we take the opportunity to recognize that it's okay to take accountability as a sign of self-love and not as a sign of shame or guilt, or like I'm shitty and I don't deserve anything. Like, that's not what that means. And you can choose to believe something else. You don't have to see accountability that way. This life is made up of your beliefs. It's your world. If somebody on the street out of nowhere is like, you're so ugly, like, why are you wearing that top? You can literally just decide that they're stupid. Who's gonna stop you? No one. No one's gonna stop you. But we're so afraid sometimes, and I struggle with this too, I'm still working on it. We're so afraid to believe in what it is that we actually want because we're afraid that it's going to be taken away from us. If we believe too hard in it, it'll be too devastating when it doesn't come to pass, or like we get rejected because of it, or someone tells us it's stupid. But the more you practice believing in the things that are actually beneficial to you and generative and put you in a higher vibration, a higher frequency, the easier it becomes to actually believe that stuff. The easier it becomes to not be fazed by bullshit and negative energy and low vibrational energy from people who clearly just hate themselves, right? If you hated yourself, you wouldn't want better for yourself. So why live like someone who hates themselves? Or waste time going back and forth with people who obviously hate themselves and are projecting onto you so that they could sun you and humble you and feel better about themselves for like 2 seconds because they sun somebody who they think is better than them. I just want all of you to be able to live the lives that I know you deserve. And the only way to do that is to start by reflecting, looking at things honestly and earnestly, looking at how you want them to be different, taking accountability for how things got to be that way. And that doesn't mean take accountability for things that you're not responsible for. Just what is within your realm of control, and forget all the other bullshit. Any shitty thing going on in your life that is not in your control, don't pay attention to it. Who cares? You can't do shit about it. Who cares? It is what it is. You are the person you've been waiting for. You have all the tools at your disposal to live the life that you want to live. The Magician card in tarot, that's what that means. You possess everything you need to live the life that you want to live, if only you would just give yourself the chance. Thank you so much for listening. I love you. I'll be doing more videos like these. Leave comments on this video. We can go ahead and have some back and forth discussions. I'm happy to answer any questions, give advice, whatever you guys need. But I love you so much. I want what's best for you. I want you all to be happy, healthy, thriving beings, creating the reality that you deserve. Later.